I hope you're all still managing with the heat. Don't faint during the service, please. If you feel not well, then please leave before. A couple of weeks ago, I was in England, and a friend of mine, who I've known since we were in grade 1, took me to the Royal Ascot races. And when you go there, you can't come as you go. You have to be dressed. They tell you how to dress. So you have to wear a top hat, you have to wear tails, and you have to wear a vest. Imagine that in the heat. I'm just thinking about that now, and this is easy. I like the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well because there are so many different things that we could talk about. We can look at the story of the Samaritan woman and look at her life. How could she possibly have ended up having 6 husbands? Did she keep changing husbands like some movie stars do? Not very likely. Or did her husbands all die, and did she not have any choice but to accept another husband because a woman alone did not have the opportunity to look after herself? We certainly could talk about the status of women in Jesus' days and compare it with today. Or we can look at what it feels like to be the brunt of gossip in town, knowing that people talk always behind your back. They cross the street when you come by because they want to avoid you. And how would that make you feel? What does it feel like to have no friends and you're all alone? And I'm sure that some of us can maybe relate to that. We could talk about any of this, and that might maybe be for some decent sermons. But today, I like to look at the events in the story about the woman at the well as steps in her faith journey. And maybe we can see something of our own faith journey in the story. John 4, verse 4 says that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Why? We know from verse 3 that Jesus had left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. It says that he had to come through Samaria. Why? Was it because it was the shortest way? You see, Palestine in Jesus' days was divided in 3 parts. Judea in the south, that's where Jerusalem is, and Galilee in the north, which is where Jesus was from, and in the middle was Samaria. So to go from Judea to Galilee, you had to either cross Samaria or go around it. And most Jews would prefer to go around Samaria than having to face the people who lived there. You see, the Jews looked at the Samaritans as people who were not of the pure Jewish race. Samaritans were descendants of the people who were left behind when the Jews were taken into exile to Babylon. And there they had remarried with non-Jews, and therefore they had become a mixed race. And as a result, the Jews hated them and would rather avoid them because they were not a pure race like them. Does that sound like some places on earth that we have today? It seems like racial discrimination is not new. And as a result, Jews traveling from Judea to Galilee would much rather go around Samaria than to cross their land. Yet, it says that Jesus had to go through Samaria. Why? There must have been a reason other than because it was the shortest way. It is as if Jesus had an appointment there. It is as if he had to be there at a certain time and meet someone. It is as if he doesn't want to miss his appointment. Is that why Jesus had to go through Samaria? And when he goes there, it's the hottest time of the day, and he arrives at a place called Sychar, and he stops at the well just outside of town, where everybody in town had to come to get their water. The Bible reminds us that the well was built by Jacob on a piece of land that was given by Jacob to his son Joseph. And we know from the Old Testament that it was also the piece of land that Abraham had bought to bury his wife Sarah. And Jesus arrives at the well at noon, which is the hottest time of the day, and he was thirsty and he was tired, and he certainly could have chosen an easier way. And he sent his disciples to town to buy some food, and he's all alone. It is as if he's waiting for someone, and that is when she arrives. A local woman carrying a water jug has come to the well to get her the daily supply of water. It was a trip that she made every day. She knew exactly what to expect. She would be on her own and be able to lower her bucket deep into the earth to draw the water she needed. And imagine the surprise to see that she is not alone. There is a man there, and she can see that he's not from there. He's a stranger, and to make it worse, he's a Jew. He belongs to the group of people who hated her people. And she hesitates for a moment. Is it safe to continue? Or should she go back and wait until he's gone? She needs the water, and she doesn't want to wait till all the town people arrive. So she takes her chance. She tries to ignore him, but he speaks to her. He says, "Will you give me a drink?" But then she can't help herself. She says, "Now, wait a minute. You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan. We are supposed to hate each other, and you are a man, and I'm a woman, and a woman is not supposed to talk to a man who is not her husband or a relative, and you are asking me for water?" I said that I would like to look at the story of the Samaritan woman as steps in our faith journey. So what's the first step? Did she come looking for Jesus, hoping that she would find him at the well? No. She didn't even know who Jesus was. She certainly wasn't looking for him. She went about her business as usual, and the first step is that Jesus is looking for her. He had to go through Samaria, the Bible said, and he sent his disciples into town so that he could meet her alone, and he was waiting for her when she came to get water. She wasn't looking for Jesus. Jesus was looking for her. Have you ever considered that the first step in your faith journey is that Jesus is looking for you? That Jesus wants to meet you? That he was waiting for you in your daily life? That he wants to meet you where you are when you're not even looking for him? I believe that Jesus came into this world not because we were looking for Jesus, but because Jesus was looking for us. Jesus came into the world looking for us, and he's still looking for us in the most unexpected places, through people you may not even know. And the first faith in our journey is not even ours. It's Jesus. He's looking for us. But the question is, will we recognize him? When the woman at the well says, "Why are you asking me for water?" Jesus says, "If you knew who it was, who I was, and you would recognize me, you would have asked me for water, and I would have given you living water. And when you receive living water, you will never be thirsty again." Now she's really floored. What is he talking about? I imagine that she may have thought by now, just my luck. Not only am I meeting a man, and what's worse, he's a Jew, and not only that, he's weird. He wants me to give water that will make me never thirsty again. That's weird. But she decides to play along for a while, and she says, "How do you suppose to get that water? You don't even have a bucket." And Jesus said, "The water I give you will never make you thirsty again. It will become like a spring of water welling up inside you. It will be welling up to eternal life." She has no idea what he's talking about. She says, "Yes, that I like to see. Why don't you give me some of that?" Have you ever listened to someone and ever thought to yourself, "I have no idea what they're talking about"? I sometimes have that with my grandchildren where they're trying to explain the computer to me. It sounds like we're talking the same language, but yet we don't understand each other. That was the case, I believe, with the Samaritan woman. They were both talking about water, yet they weren't talking about two very different things. She had no idea what Jesus was talking about. You see, the second step in her faith journey is that she's confused. She's hearing things about faith and living water, but she doesn't understand it. I think that the people who are not Christians and who are not familiar with the things that have to do with faith, our language can sometimes be confusing. When we talk about sin and being saved from sin, and chances are that the people who have not grown up in the church say, "I have no idea what you're talking about." We may as well be talking a different language. But Jesus doesn't explain what he means by living water. There are things that she has to discover first. Before she can discover who Jesus is, she has to discover first who she is. And Jesus tells her to get her husband. She says, I don't have a husband. And Jesus says, right, you've had 5 husbands, and the one you live with now is not your husband. She didn't have to tell him her past. Jesus already knew. It is as if saying, I know who you are. I know your past. I know your present. It is as if Jesus holds a mirror in front of her and he looks deep inside her and shows her who she really is. But Jesus doesn't ask her to explain the past. He doesn't say, well, you've had 5 husbands. What happened? Do you want to talk about this? Jesus doesn't say, you sure have had a colorful past. You must have had some baggage to carry with you. No, he doesn't say anything like that. He doesn't judge her. He acknowledges who she is, and he accepts her for who she is. Now I imagine that we've all things in our past that we're not all that proud of, things we would rather forget. Now remember, Jesus already knows that, and he knows our past, and he accepts us the way we are. The woman still doesn't know who she's talking to. She knows that the man she's talking to is not an ordinary person. She started by thinking that he was weird, but now an ordinary person who has never met her couldn't possibly know her past. She says, you must be a prophet. That's the only way she can explain it. But if he is a prophet, then she has a question for him. She said, your people worship God in the temple in Jerusalem, and we worship God in our own temple here on the mountain. So who's right? We all say that we worship God, but we all do it differently. Who's right? And what's the right way? Jesus says God is a spirit, and therefore you have to worship him in spirit and truth. It doesn't matter where and how you worship, said Jesus, as long as you worship God the Father in spirit and his truth. I wonder if there's a lesson in it for our different denominations. The woman has reached the next phase in her journey to faith. She's no longer dismissing what Jesus is telling her, but she's now getting curious. She now wants to know more. And when Jesus said that he would give her living water, she says that Jesus was strange. She said, yeah, right, give me some of that water so that I don't have to come here every day. But now she realizes that Jesus is no ordinary person. She realizes that he is different. She calls him a prophet because prophets know about things that are hidden. And now she wants to know more. Now she is searching and wants to find out more. And when Jesus tells her that she has to worship in spirit and in truth, she still doesn't quite understand. Well, she says, maybe there are things which we will never understand until the Messiah comes. Now, there is a longing in her voice. There is no doubt that she would love to meet the Messiah. She would love to ask him some questions. And there are many things that she doesn't understand, but she is ready to meet the Messiah. She's so close. If only she could see who it is that's talking to her. And Jesus looks at her and says, I who speak to you am he. Her faith journey, which started with Jesus looking for her, has ended with Jesus revealing himself to her. He showed her that he was the Messiah that she had been waiting for. I can just imagine what her reaction must have been. Blow me away. Then look at what happened next. Now she does not question him. She leaves her water jar by the well and runs back to town, goes door to door, and the people who had stayed away from her now are listening to her. She tells them that she has met this man at the well who has told her everything about her past, and she said to him, could he be the Messiah? She doesn't say he is the Messiah. She said, could he be the Messiah? But I think it's a question that she has already answered for herself, and she knows that it's a question they all have to answer for themselves. But she can feel the spring of living water welling up inside her, water that would lead to eternal life. She can feel it inside her. Now, we don't know what happened to her. The Bible doesn't tell us. We don't know how the meeting with Jesus had changed her life, but I'm sure that it would never be the same. The living water that Jesus has given her was bubbling up inside her, and she could no longer keep it to herself. She had to tell somebody. And she tells the town people the barriers that were between them and her have been removed. They all met Jesus, and because of her. And many believed, the Bible says, that he was the Messiah. The Samaritan woman at the well had not finished her journey of faith. She, in fact, just started. Even though she still had a lot of unanswered questions, she had met Jesus. She had told the townspeople so that they could also meet Jesus and answer for themselves the question, could this be the Messiah? The story of the Samaritan woman at the well is a remarkable story of a journey of faith, I believe. It's a journey that we all have to make, a journey we're all on. And we may be at different points of our journey. The journey of faith of the Samaritan woman started with Jesus looking for her. I think so often we think that our journey of faith is a journey of us looking for Jesus. Well, it is, but we should not forget that Jesus is also looking for us. Seek and you shall find, said Jesus. When we look for him, where will we find him? Because if he's already looking for us, the question is, will we recognize him? Do we recognize Jesus in the hospital room and the funeral parlor? Do we recognize him when we help others and others help us? Do we recognize him when a stranger starts talking to us? Jesus lined up his visit with the Samaritan woman. It says that he had to go through Samaria. Jesus had it all planned out, you see, and I wonder what he's planning for us. I wonder if he wants to meet us somewhere. The second step in her journey of faith was that she found things confusing. She didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. She doesn't understand the language of living water, but Jesus didn't give her a lesson on what it means. He wanted her to experience it. And I think that if we're honest, there are things in the words of Jesus sometimes we find confusing too. This is not only true when you're a new Christian, but also when you have been a Christian for a long time. On our journey of faith, we come across things that are confusing, but that should not discourage us. That is part of our journey in faith. And after Jesus has shown the woman who he was, the things started to fall in place. She realized that he must be a prophet. She's becoming closer to seeing who Jesus is. Then Jesus takes the initiative again and tells her that he is the Messiah. I believe that our journey of faith starts with Jesus looking for us and ends with Jesus revealing himself to us. And in between, there are times that we are confused, and there are times we wonder who and where Jesus is, but he will not give up on us. He will walk with us on our journey, and we will come to understand more and more who he is. On our journey of faith, Jesus wants to meet us. He will provide opportunities for us to meet him. The question is, will we recognize him? When we recognize Jesus, something happens inside us. Streams of living water will dwell up inside us, says Jesus, and we feel the joy and love dwelling up, and we can no longer keep it to ourselves. We want to show it to others. When we meet Jesus, the past will be gone. A new life will start, a life filled with living water that only Jesus can give. Amen. Praise be to God.